There is the first
Okay.
image to be judged.
Title, fast food. 21.
Good blurring effect, especially on the lights. A nice palette there. The darks are a little distracting. Just taken as an abstract, I think the composition is a little unbalanced.
Walking in the rain. 20.
Again, the blurring effect is nicely rendered. It works out really well, especially on the right side of the image. It's great that it leaves the umbrella and the figure readily recognizable. The bright part of the sky, as you often find with images, tends to be a little bit distracting.
Tree serpent. 22.
Lovely rendition on the water, and the really appealing texture there. Nice diagonal composition. The branches themselves are a little bit, there's a lot going on there. If it were possible to simplify that some way, it would help. Also, this seems like it might be a good fit for monochrome.
Ramen on Dusty. Or Ramon, I'm not sure. 25.
Really good use of panning. It's nice and crisp on the horse and the rider. The background is really appealingly blurred. The background, I think, it's a little light, I think, compared to the main figure, and seems a little desaturated. The whole image just feels a little undersaturated to me.
Aspen Dream. 22.
Really nicely done swipe. What you can see, the woods is really, really appealing. The texture in the ground is very nice. The trunks look very clean. It feels a little bit bright and a little undersaturated to me, though. Just bringing down the exposure, I think, would help.
Dreaming Rose. 20.
The rose part, I think, is pretty appealing. You definitely get a sense of what's going on there, despite the blurring. The image, part of the image on the right, especially the mixes of the orange and the magenta, ends up being kind of an eye maggot, especially kind of the ragged edge, which I think is a processing artifact on the magenta. But the blur is very pleasant. It looks like the blur masks the fact that it wasn't originally sharp, which works out to the image's favor.
Road Trip Dream. 22.
I appreciated this as a visual puzzle. It looks like the blur is all post-processing, given where it's sharp and where it's not, but it takes a little while for that to sink in. I like having the curve there, leading you back into the picture, and the colors of the mirror echoing the road. The blur, especially around the perimeter at the top, I think works out really well.
Red Dot Dancing. 19.
Boy, you're really stretching us as judges here with respect to the minimalism. An interesting effort. Of course, I can't tell at all how this is done. I appreciate the fact that you have one main center of interest and then sort of an echo and a blur below that. I wish there was a little bit more going on in the rest of the frame, or if the image had a defined edge so that you could kind of lay out the space and set our expectations for what's supposed to be going on.
It says puppy. Wonder if it means poppy. Well, it's typed as puppy. Maybe it meant poppy. 22.
The flower is rendered beautifully. I really like having the one seed head there drooping down below it. The background is really appealing as well. It's awfully tough to get a good picture that has dirt in it. They just, especially when it's prominent like that. So to the extent you can crop or disguise that so that it's not so prominent, that would really be helpful.
Rainbow Dance. 23.
Good capture, the moment of capture so that her face was isolated and framed. That worked out really, really well. The overall composition puts her in a nice place in the frame, the tail off to one side. It just makes a really appealing composition, especially with the black in the background. It seems like it would be worth bringing down the brights in the fabric a little bit.
Ethereal still life with drama. 21.
An intriguing idea. The background with the rainbow arcs is pretty interesting. It all centers in on the flowers though, and the flowers are kind of centered in the frame and not centered in the frame that you've set up with the arcs. So it seems like just moving all of that stuff up more prominently centered in what looks like kind of the target for the image, I think would help.
Tiny flowers, 02.
Okay.
Esther Eldridge.
So I like the filter effect here. I think that's a very good match for the subject. It creates kind of an appealing pattern over most of the image, but I think it would be a lot stronger if there were a center of interest that acted as a counterpoint for the rest of the image.
Painting trees.
Why?
Oh, that's me. Jan Ackloff. Go ahead.
To my eye, this looks a little desaturated. And for what it's worth, in this kind of swipe, the light will be coming either from the back or from the top, and the light on the hand is from the bottom. So there's a little bit of a battle there over why the hand doesn't look right.
Sternwheeler at full throttle. Okay, 21. Teresa Peterson.
The barrel of the paddle wheel with fading to orange at the edges and yet being see-through in the middle, that part's pretty compelling. And the texture in the water is also pretty cool. Unfortunately, with this kind of lighting this time of day, you're stuck with sort of Columbia gray-green. And there's also stuff at the edges of the barrel that's a little bit of a distraction.
A Walk in the Forest. 22. Howard Brunsteiner.
I think this is really engaging. I like the textures, the shapes, the type of blurring is really appealing for me. I like the framing at the bottom, all the parallel lines with the swoops that act as a counterpoint. It doesn't have a strong center of interest, but it seems like it's really more about the pattern and the texture. And like what appears to be a fence in the background, something like that, that's also a nice counterpoint to the rest of it.
Dogwood. Yeah, 23. Doug Fisher.
There are a lot of artifacts around, especially the top of the image, but any place there's out of focus stuff with edges being sort of oddly defined. I like the composition with the strong dogwood blossom. This is the only picture I think I've ever seen where there was a hummingbird just sort of casually in the background out of focus. It takes a moment to register, but it's a nice counterpoint.
Chasing the Ball. Okay, Henry Wren.
Really nicely captured pan, good action. You can get a sense of the direction the ball is moving. The head of the dog is really sharp. The paws are blurred a little bit. The whole thing actually looks a little bit like the dog may be pasted in because the shadow looks a little odd to me, but I'll just assume it's a straight shot.
Zoomed flower. Okay, John Fishback.
And again, I thought this was nicely done. The zoom effect means that nothing is really rendered sharp, although that one stamen in the center is relatively crisp. It certainly takes you into the center of the image, which seems like the center of interest. The sort of pale lavender around the whole thing makes a really interesting background. And I like the way the green is on the lower right is kind of floating out of that.
Green Reflections. Okay, Bev Shear.
I think what the photographer was going here was those sort of green pole, the tree trunk reflections, and that part does make a really neat, engaging abstract. Interesting texture in the water, just a really appealing look to that. The difficulty here is that the stuff at the top is, you know, it's not really good lighting for it, and there's a lot of chaotic content up there. So this is a case where I think cutting the top half of the image entirely, turning it around and making an abstract, just a full abstract out of it, might be stronger.
Get your ticket to the stars. Okay, 23. Howard Bruensteiner.
Really interesting abstract. I recognize the individual pieces. It doesn't look to me like the star streaks went with the original pictures that look like they're from some sort of fun center. Just all the shapes, they're just really interesting to kind of poke around the frame and see what's there, and having that one sort of central silhouette, I think, is a strong center of interest for the image. An interesting image, nicely done.